Chapter 9. Extreme Danger. Wednesday late afternoon, 30th of August, 1939. Connor arrived in the clearing. He was tall, broad-shouldered lad with black hair falling over his forehead and large, square hands which clenched into fists as hard as iron. But even worse, he had a huge boxer dog with him, straining on the end of a chain. Behind Connor was Bill, his horrid sidekick. Bill was thin and pasty-faced and sly boy, but only a year older than Tilly. Connor was 14 and much bigger than the boys in the zoo. Before she could say anything, Connor snarled, "Get him, boxer!" The dog leapt forwards, opened his enormous jaws, the size of a crocodile, thought Tilly, and closed his teeth around Rudy's thin white leg. Rudy dropped his bugle and screamed. Tilly stared in horror, her mind a jumble of thoughts. "I have to do something, anything," she told herself. "This is war and I have to be brave," but her knees were shaking. "Call your dog off," she called out to Connor as Rudy's scream grew louder. She took a step forward. "Rudy's only 9. "Rudy? That ain't English. What do you think, mate?" called out Connor. "Nah, sounds enemy to me," said Bill, and he spat on the ground. "What are you girlies doing out here with your enemy kid? What's he doing with that bugle, sending a signal to German spies?" said Connor. Bill snorted. He had shaggy pale blonde hair and nervous twitch around his mouth. "Stupid creep," thought Tilly. "Who are you calling a girl?" said Miles, beginning to latch an arrow into his bow. "You're all girls," sneered Connor. "Playing out here in the woods with the enemy and your lousy pets. You need a real dog like my Boxer." He gave a high-pitched whistle and Boxer let go of Rudy's leg. He scuttled away into the den. Rosie took a step forward and said in her best Megan voice, "What do you want? We're just playing out and I thought that you would be a bit old for our games." Sniggers went up and around the children. "We was just passing," said Connor. "Anyways, this is a bit of a rum place for you to keep your pets." "We're saving them from being dyed, so you shut up," shouted Pam. "It's torn out," thought Tilly. She's given us away." "Who'd want to keep your mangy mutts alive anyway?" said Connor with a snort. "You have a pet too. Don't you care about him?" said Tilly. "He looks thirsty to me." Boxer was sitting up, drool pouring down the sides of his mouth as he panted, tongue hanging out. To Tilly's surprise, Connor dropped to his knee beside his dog and stroked his head gently. He murmured, "All right, boy. We'll get you some water, eh?" Bill looked round, scuffing his boots on the earth, hands in his pockets, as if he didn't know what to do when Connor wasn't hurtling insults around. Then Connor straightened and said in a gruff voice, "Boxers need a lot to drink. You got any water?" He stared at Tilly and Tilly stared back, arms folded. But maybe he does care about his pet, she thought. "You can take him to the stream in the wood," Rosie said. "Then we'll very much like you to go and not come back." "You ain't going to let her talk like that, Connor," snarled Bill. Then he turned on Tilly and said, "You lot better watch out or we'll tell everyone where your stupid dogs are. Maybe we'll come back and let them out, right, mate?" "Right," said Connor. He was staring at his dog with a concerned face. Tilly stuck her chin in the air and said, "Just you try and see what you get." An arrow whistled past and landed in front of Boxer. Connor stumbled backwards, his face creased with anger. He pulled the arrow up and said, "You're trying to kill my dog. No one touches him. You hear me?" His face had gone red, and then he brandished his arrow at Miles and said, "You need a right bashing." Miles stood his ground, bow drawn, ready to load a second arrow. "You and whose army?" he jeered. But Tilly could see his ears had gone very red. Then, without any warning, Connor threw Boxer's chain at Bill and launched himself at Miles. Boxer lunged after him, nearly pulling Bill over. Connor punched Miles on the nose and blood spurted out, and Miles gave a yell and kicked out at Connor, stopping him in a few seconds. "It's going to be all right," Tilly told herself. "Miles is no pushover." But Connor was older and much stronger. He punched Miles in the mouth and then pulled his hair hard. Miles screamed out. "You fight dirty," shouted Neville. "I'll knock his block off," said Sidney. But Neville grabbed him and held him back. "Let me go, I'll kill him." Sidney struggled with Neville's arms and his fists punching in the air. Connor let out a roar and punched Miles hard in the stomach. Miles crumpled to the ground and Connor stood over him, hands on his hips like a prize fighter, grinning. "You filthy coward!" screamed Tilly. Bill lost his battle to hold Boxer and the great dog leapt towards Miles, growling. Miles squealed and rolled up into a ball, his arms over his head. "Call him off, you pigs!" shouted Rosie. "If the Germans invade, you can fight them. What are you going to war with us?" Rudy had come to the doorway of the hut and Connor nodded towards him. "Your mate, the enemy kid. He's not one of us. You better keep him on a lead." He grabbed Boxer's change and called to Bill. "Come on, let's move out." The boys slouched off into the direction of the stream. Rosie was down on her knees and her handkerchief turning a bright red as she pressed it against Miles's battered nose. You were so brave. You deserved a medal." "I'm not scared of them bullies," declared Miles, but Tilly knew he was. They all were. The lovely afternoon at the hut had been spoiled and everyone started to pick up their bikes. Then Rosie called out, "Wait a minute, I think we should take an oath." "What? Loaf?" asked Pam. "Oath, stupid," said Sydney. "It means you swear to keep something secret, right, Nev?" Neville nodded. "Good idea," said Tilly. "I swear on Bonnie's life I will never give away the emergency zoo." "I swear on Clover's death," said Pam. One by one all the children swore and then Rosie cried, "Doof tep cobras." "Doof tep, doof tep," shouted the children. They drifted away, Ruddy jogging off behind the scudders and the bugle bumping away at his back. Miles gathered his arrows and bow, and when they were finally alone, he said to Rosie and Tilly, "What if they come back tonight and try to let the pets out? I think one of us should keep watch." "I was thinking the same," said Tilly, "but your dad won't never let you sleep out in the woods, and I can't imagine ever mentioning such a thing to Megan," said Rosie. "We don't tell them," said Tilly. Rosie stared at her, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" "Simple. I say that you want me to camp in your garden tonight, and I will tell Megan the same, only at my house." "But what if they speak to each other?" said Rosie in her anxious voice. "It's a chance we'll have to take. We live 3 streets apart. They don't bump into each other that often." Rosie still looked uncertain, so Tilly said, "Look, if Connor and Bill come back tonight, they might do something really stupid. I don't know what I'll do if they let Bonnie escape." "I'll come too," said Miles. "I don't know what it's like round yours, but my mum and dad all they do is argue about the war, dig up the garden and listen to the radio. I'll tell them Scout Leader wants us to practice camping before the war starts. And I'll say that we're going to sleep out in the garden in a tent a friend's lending us, so we have an excuse to bring a blanket," said Rosie in an excited voice. "That'll work." "And food," said Miles. "We've got to have food, biscuits and stuff. We'll have a smashing night and make sure that those nincompoops stay away." Tilly and Rosie laughed at the word nincompoops, and they all felt much better. "Meet back here after tea," said Tilly. They all picked up their bikes, pushed through the thicket and set off across the fields, the girls side by side, with Miles weaving in and out around them. The sun was still quite high in the sky and the larks were calling in the warm air above their heads. Bright red poppies bobbed in between the tall ears of yellow corn, and Tilly felt she could cycle forever in the sunshine. They crossed the canal and parted at the corners, but then she found herself stuck behind a huge lorry. "Here it comes," called out Mrs. Benson, who was leaning over her garden gate. "What is it?" Tilly called back. "We're getting our own aircraft gun in the park." Tilly mounted the pavement and cycled round the side of the lorry, which had halted for a moment. Now she could see it was an army lorry painted in kayak and loaded onto its open flat bottom was a huge gun with wheels bigger than a tractor and a barrel which reached up into the sky, pointing straight at the sun. She felt tiny as an ant as she stared up at it. "That'll blow the Nazis out of the sky," said the man next door as he walked past, pushing his cap back on his head. "But if we need a gun that big," thought Tilly, "how big are the bombs the Germans are going to drop?" Shuddering despite the warm sun, she rode up to her front gate. The Anderson shelter in their back garden seemed ridiculously flimsy beside the massive gun and the even more massive threats of bombers in the sky. The war was marching ever closer, booming in their ears, threatening the houses and the gardens, the schools and the people and all the animals in the countries in the world. Nothing was going to prevent it. However much they wished it would just go away.